Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into one of the absolute powerhouse political forces in Indian history, the Maratha Empire. You know, long before the British set up shop across the subcontinent, it was actually the Marathas who completely redrew the map of India during the 17th and 18th centuries. So we're going to trace that incredible timeline, from their days as regional warriors right up to becoming the undisputed dominant power in India.
Okay, let's dive into this. The whole story really kicks off on the Deccan Plateau. See, before this massive empire even existed, the Marathas were just Marathi-speaking farmers, traders, and really skilled soldiers working for local sultanates. They were tightly knit, bound by a rich culture and the Bhakti movement, led by folks like Tukaram and Samrat Ramdas, which was all about equality and devotion. But how on earth did they go from serving other kings to building their own massive empire?
Well, our timeline today covers a critical century, and we're really going to treat the Maratha Empire itself as the main character of our story here. We start with the birth of Shivaji in 1630, hit his coronation in 1674, track the massive expansion when Bajirao I takes over in 1720, and then look at the absolute turning point at the Battle of Panipat in 1761. It is literally a masterclass in survival, strategy, and pure ambition.
So, right at the start of our timeline is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, born in 1630. Growing up, his mother, Jizabai, told him these epic stories from the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and that, combined with the Bhakti movement, gave Shivaji a very specific unifying vision, Swarajya. But Swarajya wasn't just, kicking out foreign rulers. It was this deep core philosophy of justice, taking care of the people, and actually maintaining strict religious tolerance.
Of course, to build Swarajya, you can't just have an idea. You need some serious muscle, specifically defensible strongholds. So Shivaji systematically started capturing forts up in the rugged Western Ghats. We're talking places like Torna, Rajgad, Raigad, Purandar, Singahad, and Pratapgarh. And these weren't just castles, right? They were the absolute lifelines of the kingdom, storing food, holding weapons, and basically serving as giant stone shields against any invading armies.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly how they survived against these massive, incredibly well-funded armies. The secret? Ganimi Kava, or guerrilla warfare. The Marathas knew, hey, if we fight a traditional open-field battle against the massive sultanates or the Mughals, we're going to lose. So instead, they used these small, hyper-fast, highly trained units. They used their intimate knowledge of the hills and forests to just launch these devastating surprise attacks, and then boom, vanish right back into the terrain.
That sheer audacity actually leads us to one of the most legendary underdog moments in Indian history. It's 1659. The Sultan of Bijapur sends this absolute giant of a commander, Afzal Khan, to just crush Shivaji completely. They arrange this meeting at Pratapgarh Fort. Now, Shivaji totally anticipates a trap, so when Afzal Khan goes in for an embrace and tries to attack, Shivaji defends himself using this concealed weapon called Wagnak, literally tiger claws, and gets out safely. The Marathas win the battle that follows, and Shivaji's reputation just explodes overnight.
Naturally, all this growing power seriously alarmed the Mughal emperor, Aurangzeb, which kicked off a really fierce era of conflict. You have the Treaty of Purandar in 65, and let's not forget Shivaji's insanely daring escape from Mughal custody in Agra. The stakes just kept getting higher. But the crazy thing is, despite clashing with literally the most powerful empire in the region, the Marathas just kept rebuilding their strength. And all that grit finally pays off. In 1674, Shivaji is officially crowned Chhatrapati at Raigad Fort. This is huge. It wasn't just a fancy ceremony. It officially birthed the Maratha Empire. It was this bold, in-your-face declaration of total independence that permanently cemented the Maratha identity. Swarajya wasn't just an idea anymore. It was an actual geopolitical reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates something absolutely crucial. The Marathas weren't just guys with swords. They were highly organized administrators. To run this brand new empire, Shivaji set up the Ashta Pradhan, which was a specialized council of 8 ministers. You've got the Peshwa acting as prime minister, plus dedicated heads for finance, intelligence, the army, foreign affairs, the whole shebang. It was a total masterclass in statecraft, backed up by a strong army and a newly built navy to protect India's western coast.
But every empire faces a massive test. And for the Marathas, that came in 1680 when Shivaji died. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb sensed blood in the water and launched a massive all-out campaign to just wipe the Marathas off the map. This plunged the entire region into a really dark, decades-long fight for pure survival.
So, how did they survive?
Well, it's an incredible story of resistance. Step 1. Shivaji's eldest son, Sambhaji, fights bravely but is captured and executed in 1689 because he refuses to surrender. That sacrifice actually fires up the Marathas even more. Step 2. His brother, Rajaram, strategically moves the capital way down south to Jinji Fort to keep the resistance alive. And Step 3. After Rajaram dies, his widow, Maharani Tarabai, steps up. She was an absolutely brilliant leader who reorganized the army, completely frustrated Aurangzeb, and literally saved the kingdom from collapsing.
And you know what? That relentless resistance actually worked. In 1707, after years of being completely bogged down fighting the Marathas, Aurangzeb dies. This is a massive turning point for our timeline. His endless campaigns had totally exhausted the Mughals. Suddenly, there's this huge power vacuum across the subcontinent, and the battle-tested Marathas are just perfectly positioned to step in.
Now, as the empire started expanding rapidly, we see a major shift in how the whole thing was run. The role of the Peshwa, the prime minister, started becoming incredibly powerful. Leaders like Balaji Vishwanath stepped up, united all the different Maratha chiefs, and basically took direct control of the administration and the military.
And this aggressive new era is perfectly captured by a quote from Baji Rao I, who became Peshwa in 1720. Strike at the roots of the Mughal Empire and the branches will fall on their own. I mean, how epic is that? Baji Rao I was a visionary military genius who basically believed that the best defense is a relentless offense, and he aimed his sights right at the decaying Mughal authority.
His strategy worked flawlessly. Under Baji Rao I, and then later his successor, Balaji Baji Rao, the empire exploded outward. We're talking rapid expansion into Malwa, Gujarat, Bundelkhand, and right up into the Delhi region. During this window, the Marathas reached their absolute greatest territorial extent. They were, without a doubt, the undisputed dominant power in India.
So, the crucial point is, how exactly do you fund a military machine of that size? Well, they had this ingenious revenue system centered around the Chauth. Basically, this was a strict 25% tax collected from neighboring, non-Maratha states. And what were they paying for? Protection. Which, ironically enough, mostly meant protection from the Marathas themselves.
Alongside that chouth, they also collected the Sardesh Mukhi. This was an extra 10% tax levied specifically on areas where the Marathas claimed hereditary rights. These highly organized revenue streams were just vital. They paid for the massive forts, kept the local courts running smoothly, and ensured their incredibly fast-moving cavalry was always paid and ready to ride.
All right, so our timeline now tracks forward past that massive expansion era, pushing us directly towards 1761. And 1761 is arguably one of the most devastating yet important years in all of Indian history.
That year brought the Third Battle of Panipat. The Marathas found themselves facing off against a massive invading force led by Ahmad Shah Abdali of the Durrani Empire. It was an absolutely fierce, brutal clash, and unfortunately for the Marathas, it ended in a heavy defeat and a devastating loss of soldiers.
The aftermath of Panipat permanently shifted the political landscape. Now, to be clear, the Marathas were incredibly resilient. They actually recovered within a decade and remained a huge political force. But Panipat did cause a temporary decline in their overwhelming dominance. And that tiny window, that power vacuum, was exactly what other rising forces, especially the British East India Company, needed to grow much stronger across the subcontinent. But despite that setback in 1761, the Maratha legacy is just absolutely monumental. Think about it. Politically, they took down Mughal supremacy and built one of India's largest empires. Militarily, they practically wrote the book on guerrilla warfare in India and built a massive coastal navy. Administratively, the revenue systems were incredibly efficient, and culturally, they fiercely protected local traditions and promoted a deep regional pride that you can still feel today.
Which brings us to our final thought today. The Marathas were so much more than just a military juggernaut. They were fueled by a really profound idea. So how did the Maratha ideal of Swarajya set the stage and inspire India's later freedom movements against the British? It's really something to chew on. Those early seeds of self-rule planted by Shivaji in the Western Ghats echoed for centuries, proving that the desire for self-governance is a force that literally alters history. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you walk away with a much richer understanding of this absolutely incredible empire.